Alright, what is up everybody? This is Alex once again with the next installment in my DC Animated Universe movie review series. That is the longest title in the world. We've done Justice League The New Frontier and Superman Doomsday, and we are on to Batman Gotham Knight. And I'm super excited to talk about this one. It came out in 2008, just a few short days before The Dark Knight actually hit theaters, and while it's not a direct prequel or sequel to Batman Begins, there are a couple of story elements and characters that actually show up in these stories that can link the two together. So it's a cool little bridge. Now, I said stories because this isn't actually one film. This is 6 individual films, and each one is worked on by a different animation studio, primarily known for their work in anime, Japanese animation. And what's really cool here is that a lot of these studios also worked on the Animatrix, and so getting to see them put their spin on The Dark Knight is really cool. So what I'm going to do here is basically break these down individually, talk about the characters, things like that as we go through, and then do kind of my final thoughts on the anthology as a whole. But I'm a huge Batman fan, and having just watched this again this weekend, I got reminded of just how cool this actually is, because it does a lot of things with Batman that you've not really seen before, and it dives into some spaces that we really haven't seen explored in the more mainstream Batman media. So this is Batman Gotham Knight. I'm super excited to talk about this one. So we're going to kick it right off with the very first part of the anthology. And this is Have I Got a Story for You? This is done by Studio 4C. And I'll be honest, I am not the biggest connoisseur of anime, so I'm not I don't watch the really popular ones like One Punch Man and One Piece. I've dabbled in things like Trigun and Dragon Ball Z back when I was a kid, but not a huge fan of it nowadays. So these studios probably have a lot more impact if you're familiar with their work. But I did look into them a little bit, and it is kind of cool to see things that I have seen in the past worked on by some of these companies. So there is that, and also it's worth noting that Studio 4C actually returns and does the entirety of the animation on Justice League: The Flashpoint Paradox, which is one of my favorite DC animated movies, and we'll get to that one here in just a few weeks. But basically what we have here is a story that revolves around 4 kids. They're off skateboarding, and they come together, and it turns out that three of the kids have just had an encounter with the Batman. One kid was attacked by this man in black, and this living shadow version of Batman, or what he perceives as a living shadow, saves him and beats the crap out of him. One of the girl of the group, it has a similar encounter in which she perceives Batman as this very Dracula vampire-esque, kind of like in Batman and Dracula Red Rain, which is a very underrated comic if you ask me, and sees the two of them, the Man in Black character, which is the same villain in each of these pieces of the story, just fighting a different version of Batman as perceived by the kid. The third child perceives Batman as this robot warrior, capable of jumping from building to building. And what's really cool here is that each of the interactions between Batman, the kid, and this Man in Black, who we'll actually get to see revealed in the second part of this anthology, is told in reverse. So it's kind of a cool storytelling device here. But each of them kind of has their view of Batman shaped by what they see. Batman's very much this enigmatic figure, because this is still, if we're viewing this in series, this is still after Batman Begins, so nobody has a good idea about what Batman looks like, or who Batman is for that matter. So it's kind of cool to see these kids react to seeing what they perceive to be as Batman, how they interpreted Batman. They're telling their stories to the fourth friend, who hasn't seen Batman yet. When the industrial park that they're skateboarding at, the Man in Black actually breaks through the glass, being chased by Batman, who has literally just been beat to hell already. And it's revealed that he is not a robot, he is not a living shadow, he is not a vampire, he's very much a man, because he'd see tears in his costume, he's bleeding, he's definitely worn down, but he's got the Man in Black on the ropes. The fourth friend, who hasn't seen Batman yet, manages to knock out the Man in Black with his skateboard, and Batman goes, "Hey, thanks, I owe you one." and it was so great to hear the voice of Kevin Conroy coming through the Batman voice again. This is the first time he's done this, the voice again, within the DC animated universe, and it carries on a pretty good way through these movies, with a couple of exceptions here and there. But it's so great to hear that iconic Batman voice come through. Now, what's really interesting about this first part of the anthology is that it actually is a throwback to a throwback. If you remember watching the new adventures of Batman and Robin, which was sort of the continuation of the animated Batman series in the 90s, there's an episode called Legends of the Dark Knight, in which we get to see this group of kids kind of walking through Gotham City, and they're talking about their interactions with Batman. This is the first time I ever got to see anything about The Dark Knight Returns, which is the Frank Miller story, which we're going to actually get to review here in a couple of weeks as well. We get to see a version of the 1960s Batman, and then a much more sort of modernized Batman fight between him and Firefly, and that's actually a throwback to a 1970s issue of Batman comics, The Batman That Nobody Knows. And so it's just kind of cool to see this theme carried through from the comics to the TV show and then adapted into this movie here. It's just a cool nod to fans, and I remember the first time watching it just kind of thinking, where have I seen this format before? And then it clicked, because also on the DVD there are 4 Batman animated series episodes, Legends of the Dark Knight being one of them, and as soon as I watched it, it clicked, and I just went, wow, how cool is that to see this same sort of storytelling device be used multiple times. It's a really cool way to kick this whole story off. It's the animation done by Studio 4 Degrees Celsius is very very stylized. I wouldn't call it detailed. The backgrounds are detailed themselves. The characters have a little bit more stylization to them. They're not very detailed, but they kind of have this very anime quality to them, which is really kind of cool. And seeing all the different versions of Batman is quite cool as well. I quite like the Living Shadow version, how he's kind of melting in and out of shadows as he's fighting this man in black. So I really liked Have I Got a Story for You. It's a great way to kick off this anthology. Next, we have Crossfire, which is done by Production IG, and this is probably my least favorite of them, just as far as the entire anthology goes. We're introduced to Chris Allen and Anna Ramirez, Ramirez being one of the detectives that we actually get to see in The Dark Knight, and this is all about them. They've basically been brought in by James Gordon. They work for the Major Crimes Unit, and Commissioner Gordon is giving them the Man in Black, who they reveal to be, I lost his name, Jacob Feely, there we go. And they're basically taking him to Arkham Asylum, which has now become the island after the events of Batman Begins. The island's been flooded with the fear gas from the Scarecrow, and we get to see sort of the ramifications of that. So they throw him in the back of the squad car, and they're driving to drop off Feely, and they're having a discussion about is Batman helping? Is he a vigilante? Is he a crime fighter? And Chris is very much on the side of not liking Batman. He thinks that he doesn't have a place in Gotham, and he's just creating more problems. While Ramirez is very much on the side of Batman. She thinks that she's doing good, and even though they're kind of just his cleanup crew as Alan perceives them, he is providing a service. So they drop off Feely at Arkham, and they're leaving, and at this point Chris sort of reveals that he's probably going to be leaving the MCU. Ramirez whips him into a parking lot where she's basically going to confront him, and that's when we are introduced to the Russian mob and Sal Maroni, who we do get to see again in The Dark Knight. Sort of, it's a turf war, and they're shooting the place up, and out of nowhere Batman arrives, and maybe it's just the way I kind of perceived it, or maybe the way they've actually drawn it to intend this action, but Batman is huge in this part of the short. Like, he looks at least 10 feet tall. You never really see any of his body. It's just the head and then the cape. So he's just kind of like this black shadowy mass, and he is flipping around and beating the hell out of these guys. There's a really great moment where he saves Detective Allen, pulls him up onto an adjacent building, and we hear a a choir arrangement very much in line with the Danny Elfman score from the original Batman movie in the 1989. Super cool moment there, very nostalgic. We see Batman, sort of intervene, beats up the bad guys, and basically says, to Alan and Ramirez, you guys work for Gordon, you're on the MCU team. Gordon's a good judge of character. Thank you for doing your job. It's a cool little element here. There's not a lot of substance to it. It's just kind of the filler piece. It is cool that we do get to see it's because it's told from the perspective of these detectives, not so much Batman's perspective. It's kind of cool just to kind of see what Batman's effect on somebody else might be, which is something I don't think we get to see too often. And I would think that would make a really cool, just movie in general for superheroes. Don't be so focused on the actions of the heroes. Focus on the actions and the reactions and the perception of the heroes from the general public. We can remember back to Captain America: Civil War, Zemo being sort of a victim of the accident in Age of Ultron, and if maybe we got to see things through his eyes, which we do a couple times, makes it for a pretty compelling villain. So I think this might be a cool way to explore superheroes in different medias, going forward. I would really like to see what happens when, Superman, clashes with Zod in Metropolis. Let's not worry about Superman. Let's focus on the rest of the city and, what they saw happen and things that happen around them. I think it'd be a really cool way to explore superheroes, because we've seen what happens with superheroes when they clash. We've seen them, saving the world. Let's see the people that have the lives saved. Have their lives saved. I think that's a really cool way to kind of interpret this. And while, like I said, it's not my favorite part of this anthology, looking at it from that perspective, it gives it some merit, and so it definitely has its place in this anthology. It's a good little placeholder, but still not my favorite here. Next up, we've got Field Test, which is done by B-Train Animation Studios. And this one's actually pretty cool, just because it's we get to see Bruce Wayne out of the Batman suit for the first time and have him kind of interact with different characters. So we're dealing with a satellite accident here. One of the Wayne Tech satellites has crashed due to an electromagnetic pulse that goes on inside of it. And Lucius Fox, who's actually being voiced by Kevin Michael Richardson, who is the voice of the Batman, that cartoon series that ran on the WB for a while, that cartoon's Joker, which is actually kind of cool. You can hear little bits of that character's voice in there. And he takes the gyroscope that basically runs the guidance system on the satellite and creates Batman a little device that fits into his suit that sends out shockwaves whenever it detects a bullet, essentially. The shockwave of the bullet triggers this little device to send out a pulse that basically makes Batman bulletproof. So we get to see some of the test here where Lucius is firing at a dummy with this little device attached to the chest, and it's just bouncing the bullets off. It's a really cool kind of effect, and he's like, yeah, we can put this in the suit and make you that much more, effective in combat. Batman's like, that's cool. We get to see Batman playing golf with a pretty corrupt businessman. And he actually uses the technology, the sort of like EMP pulse, to knock the guy's golf club out of his hand and steal the guy's PDA, because they're trying to investigate his link to Sal Maroni's gang, the Russian mob leader, and a couple other things that we'll see further on towards the end of the anthology. So we see Batman suit up. He goes out to confront the Russian mob and Sal Maroni's gang out on these boats that they own, and we get to see Batman fight in this suit that now has this sort of bulletproof-esque ability to it. So both the gangs are just firing at him. The bullets are flying off. Batman's beating the ever-living hell out of everybody, because that's what Batman does. He confronts Maroni and the Russian, basically says, you take the docks, you take, I think, the Narrows or something, just figure it out until I can convict one or both of you on some kind of charges, and then you can fight over who gets the top bunk in Arkham. Just, ugh. At which point, another one of the goons comes up, shoots at Batman, the device triggers, and deflects the bullet into a innocent gang member. And Batman's like, I can't have this. Takes the guy to the hospital, throws him out, and it's like, take care of this guy. Nobody shoot anybody. And we see at the end of the short, we see Batman giving the device back to Lucius, and he says, I'm willing to put my life on the line to do what I have to do, but it has to be my life and no one else's, which really reinforces that Batman doesn't want to hurt anybody unnecessarily in his war on crime. He's willing to take the beats and the shots and everything else. But as soon as it hurts somebody else, that's where he draws the line. And it's really cool to see not Batman or Bruce Wayne as Batman delivering this line, but Bruce Wayne as himself. And it's sort of just, it humanizes him even more. And it shows that even though he clearly separates his identity from Batman from his identity as Bruce Wayne, that there's still that common thread that he sees that as an absolute. He will save the city, but not at the risk of someone else's life. It's a really powerful but very simple message that reinforces what Batman's all about. And this is, like I said, this is one of my favorite ones on here. Incidentally, there's a fun little cameo voice here as Anton. I forget which character actually Anton is, but it's voiced by Will Friedle, who, if you know your WB and also ABC shows here, Will Friedle is the actor who played Eric Matthews on Boy Meets World, which is one of my favorite shows growing up. He also played Terry McGinnis on Batman Begins, which was probably one of the greatest cartoons that the studio has produced in a very long time, and I was so sad to see it go. I love the Batman Beyond universe, and I really hope that one day we get to see a Batman Beyond movie, whether it's one of these animated videos that DC does direct to video, or if we get to see one on the big screen. I would love to see Batman Beyond, played out much bigger than just the cartoon. So Field Test, I really like Field Test here. It's a great way to kind of show Batman trying new technology, but at the same time making sure that the technology does not put the mission at jeopardy. So next we have In Darkness Dwells. This is done by Madhouse, who actually do a couple of these here, and I do believe that Madhouse was one of the predominant studios that worked on the Animatrix. Don't quote me on that. I'm cross-referencing all of this, and some of them did and some of them didn't. So this is one of the more action-packed ones, and Madhouse's design aesthetic really comes through beautifully in this. So we have the police responding to a riot where a cardinal has been giving a sermon, and in sort of like the lower slums of Gotham City, when this monster attacks, this lizard-like monster attacks the sermon and takes a cardinal down below. It's revealed that this is actually Killer Croc that we're dealing with. Lieutenant Gordon, Chris Allen, and Ann Ramirez are back on the scene. We saw them in Crossfire, and their theory is that Scarecrow's fear toxin is behind the riot that occurred at the cardinal's sermon, and ever since that the Narrows obviously was gassed in Batman Begins. So Batman's like, all right, I'm on the case here. And there's this really cool moment where they're walking through, Ramirez, Allen, and Gordon are walking through these tunnels, and Gordon says, hey, can I have a minute? And they both leave him off. And this scene is composed such that Gordon's kind of off to the side, and there's this big empty space, and he just goes, are you there? I know you're here. And Batman just hangs off the top of the ceiling, like right into frame. It's like, what's up, guys? I'm Batman. It's just cool to see him just kind of, swing down and reveal himself to Gordon. It's absolutely cool. And they're talking about how they think it's, Jonathan Crane, the Scarecrow, has, infected the masses. And there's just the style of some of these shots is absolutely amazing. There's obviously this hole in the ground where they're thinking, okay, that's our entrance. That's where we have to go to kind of save this Cardinal guy. And Batman literally dissolves into this shadowy, twisted, like, liquid thing and just right down the chute. I was like, whoa. Like, in my mind, you always think about just Batman sort of like jumping off a roof or, just wherever. But to see him sort of dematerialize in this very stylized way, just absolutely fantastic. And I know it's hard to pull something like that off in, the live-action movies. We have Justice League coming out this year. But I would love to see some of these more stylized elements of Batman be translated to the big screen, in a way that makes him just much more sort of, elemental than the man actually is. I would love to see that actually be the case here. But Batman finds Killer Croc. They end up fighting, in which Killer Croc actually bites Batman, infecting him with Scarecrow's fear gas, which is now in his blood, both of their blood. So Batman's freaking out. Well, less so because it's Batman. He's obviously hallucinating and comes upon the Scarecrow, who is putting the Cardinal on trial for helping the citizens of Gotham, which is like a no-no for Scarecrow, who looks really cool. He looks very much like the original version from the early 90s animated series, and kind of just like that actual Scarecrow-y kind of vibe. He's got some size out of the back of his shoulders. He looks really cool. So they fight. Batman saves the Cardinal, by lighting this methane cloud that is hanging above them in the sewer and just literally blowing the entire place up. It's a really cool scene, and Batman's fighting these cultists that the Scarecrow has gathered around him. And again, the stylization of this just comes through immensely, as it is with a lot of these shorts in which the animators decided to hide Batman's body underneath his cape and just kind of show him flipping around. Like there's an occasional leg that swoops out to do a kick, but for the most part he's just kind of zipping around, and he just looks like this living shadow, and it's very, very cool. So Batman, saves the Cardinal. They get out, and they get the Cardinal onto a helicopter that Goran's flown in. He's like, hey, can we give you a ride? And Batman's like, no, maybe next time, and he dives off. Again, they're covering his arms with the cape, and it just makes Batman look that much more monstrous and kind of elemental. It's very, very cool to see the way they decided to do this. Maybe they don't like drawing arms. That's fine too. But it's a really cool scene to see Batman jump off and glide away, and there's literally no indication that he's even holding his arms out. You have to see it to actually kind of get the full effect of the scene. But believe me when I say armless Batman flying around is super cool. So this is probably one of my more favorite ones, just kind of getting to see Batman in the sewers, like in the muck, which is where we kind of think about Batman operating in some cases. When he's not flying in the sky, he's in the sewers. He has a conversation with a guy on a underground abandoned subway platform, and he's like, hey, what does the city look like when you're flying up above, Batman? It looks dirty. And it's just like, that's how he perceives things. And we get to see some cool tech that Batman breaks out. He has a respirator built into his mask that he deploys when he's walking through the sewers, and he has these lenses, kind of like what we see in The Dark Knight, where he's using sort of that echolocation, but it's almost like X-ray-ish radar that he's looking through. So it's cool to see the different technologies that Batman's implemented to his suit. Minor touches at that, but they really kind of build up the character of Batman. We get to see that he's a gadget superhero instead of just I'm going to punch things superhero. So that's In Darkness Dwells. This is followed up by Working Through Pain, which is technically a direct sequel to In Darkness Dwells, and this is done again by 4 Degrees Celsius. And this follows up almost immediately after In Darkness Dwells. We find Batman in the sewers, and he's fighting a guy who has been also affected by the fear gas from the Scarecrow. Batman gets shot, and he cauterizes the wound, and he basically is stumbling through these sewers. And this is a really kind of painful and claustrophobic section of the anthology, because seeing Batman just on his hands and knees trying to crawl out of a sewer, he's bleeding, there are tears in his suit, he is just at his wit's end. He's still got the fear gas in him, and he's kind of hallucinating here and there. But just seeing Batman suffer like this is really, really rough, and it hits hard. And this then turns into a much more Bruce Wayne focused story, because as he's crawling through the sewer, he's having flashbacks to a time where he was actually, I'm trying to find where he was at. He's off working with a relief effort in, I would assume, a Middle Eastern country. Where he is trying to figure out, how to deal with his pain, hence the title Working Through Pain. He's trying to figure out, how to make his pain work for him. And he tries to get in with a group called the Fakir, which I didn't actually know was a real group, but these are people primarily, they are Arabic people, they are Muslim aesthetics who basically denounce all relationships and possessions and rely on the spiritual need for God, and that's what they rely on. They need nothing else, and so it's this very sort of detached mentality, which is kind of cool. And they deny him access to this group, the Fakir do, and so he gets in touch with this lady named Cassandra, who was a fakir, but was also kicked out for unknown reasons, at least at this point. So she says, I will teach you. I can teach you how to manage your pain. And so they do this montage of him, walking through coals without reacting, laying on a bed of nails without reacting. Just the things that you see, like these, these mystics and gurus, in popular media that are just like, wow, how is he doing that? Shouldn't that hurt something? And this is all done while Batman is, again, crawling through this sewer, and he's just absolutely beaten down. And you can tell there's a parallel here of this is him dealing with the pain that he feels by, this parallel story going on. The story wraps up with Cassandra being attacked by this group of villagers who are basically just like, they think she's a witch because it's revealed that the fakir kicked her out when she was revealed to be a boy. Whether or not they knew she was a boy when they first let her into their group is not revealed, but she basically alludes it to as it's just a game to them. These boys would eventually grow tired of their game. They would stop beating me up. I could just go on my way because I dealt with it. Their physical pain and the pain of their words and the pain of their attacks, I dealt with it. I worked through it, and I just went on with my life, and they got bored. So they're attacking her, but Bruce intervenes, and he clearly shows off he's mastered these techniques. He has a board broken across his face, a bottle is also smashed over his back, and he doesn't faze him at all. And he has this very serene, stoic look on his face as he just beats the crap out of these guys. And Cassandra says, you've learned how to master your pain and work through it, but I can't teach you anymore. Whatever you're trying to do, your pain is leading you on a path that you want to go down. You're not trying to get over this. You're trying to embrace it and make it work for you, which is a very profound statement for Bruce, because it kind of solidifies that this idea of he's going to use his pain to continue his war on crime and to avenge his parents, which we kind of get to do with a little bit in the next part of the anthology here. So he leaves, and the final shots show Batman is basically he's underneath this grate on a street, and he's stuck down there, and he's been. As he digs his way out, he realizes that he's digging through a pile of guns, and he pulls them out, and he's like, "Oh my gosh!" Because he remembers the night in Crime Alley when his parents were shot, and he just it's a giant cache, or a cache where people were just basically stashing these guns, and he's like, I can't let these stay here. And so Alfred comes and saves him, and he's reaching his hand down to pull him out. And Batman just looks up and he's like, with all these guns in his hand, he's like, I can't give you my hand. We have to take these too. And that's how Working Through Pain ends. Guys, we're gonna spoil all these movies, guys. They've been out long enough. So it's a really cool element to see Batman, or with Bruce in this case, how he developed the skills to sort of keep the fight going even when he's absolutely broken. And it's neat to see this very short side of the story, but it's very, very necessary, I think, to know that Batman went on a quest to figure out, obviously he's a very skilled fighter, and that makes him dangerous, but for him to be able to work through the pain that's inflicted on him and just say, I can handle it, I'm gonna make it work for me, and I'm going to keep going. That's what kind of gives Batman this even more supernatural element to his character. So it's a really cool story here, and that's Working Through Pain. Again, just fantastic animation here as well. Studio 4C, kind of 4 degrees Celsius, kind of mixes up their aesthetic from Have I Got a Story for You, and it's a little less stylized in the character designs, but there's still enough of these neat little elements. The backgrounds are still fantastically well done, and the characters still have that kind of anime aesthetic to them, a little less so that I mentioned in Have I Got a Story for You. So our last part of the anthology is Deadshot, and this is again done by Madhouse. Again, we saw them do the In Darkness Dwells short, and this is probably the coolest one of them all. They've all been kind of building up to this one because these are all relatively connected to each other, and this is our big climax. So we're starting off with a flashback to the parents getting murdered because every Batman movie has to have a flashback to that night. I don't know why. I mean, granted that the one in Dawn of Justice was absolutely fantastic, and Jeffrey Dean Morgan looks just like Thomas Wayne should, and I do hope we get to see him suit up as Batman in an Earth 2-esque story at some point, but that's beside the point. We get to see the flashback again, obviously. There's a funny moment where Alfred comes in with a bag of guns, and he's like, Master Wayne, can you stop putting these around the house? I keep tripping over them. And we transition to a scene that shows Deadshot, who is the assassin, basically known for his marksmanship skills, and we see him on a Ferris wheel, rotating about a mile and a half away from this skyscraper, and he basically takes a shot from a rotating Ferris wheel that covers an entire length of the city, through a window, through several champagne glasses, through the mayor's head. And it's just like, was that necessary? And that's kind of the introduction to him. If you've seen the Suicide Squad movie, you know that's kind of his MO. He likes doing these really fanciful trick shots to pull off his targets. And it's turns out that he's being contracted to come to Gotham to take out, perceivably, Gordon. That's who they think they're going after. That's who we think we're going after. So it's revealed that the businessman that Bruce played golf against has contracted Deadshot in this case, and it's been the underlying threat this whole time. There are some elements in the field test part that allude to this. So getting to see this all kind of wrapped up is very, very nice. And the hit has been put out on Gordon by the Russian, who is also kind of working with this businessman whose name I'm forgetting all of a sudden. Ronald Marshall is the name of the character. And they're all linked to each other, through via emails and things like that. And basically, this whole short is revolving around the final conflict between Batman and Deadshot. There's a motorcade that Gordon is riding in, and Batman's sort of flying through the sky, which is really kind of cool to see Batman just kind of cruising around through the sky, using the grappling hook and not relying on the Batmobile or the Batplane or anything like that. It's just cool to see him zipping around as Batman, which you don't see all that often. Even in a lot of the cartoons, he's always in the Batmobile, or he fires one grappling hook and swings across a rope, and that's it. This we're getting to see him traverse the city much like you do in the Arkham game, which I thought was really cool. And again, no armed Batman gliding around is really cool. I'm just saying. So he's in communication with Alfred, and it's like, oh, there's a train coming up under a bridge which Gordon's got to pass underneath. I can't imagine that Deadshot would be crazy enough to try and take a shot from a speeding train. Turns out there's another train coming the other way. Deadshot's on that one. The door flings open. He's got his, his crazy metal mask and red bodysuit, which is very faithful to the comic version of Deadshot's costume, which I thought was a really cool element. And he takes the shot at Gordon. Batman comes in and deflects it with the arm gauntlet. And I'm like, no way, that's not possible. It's Batman, though. And it's revealed that it's not actually Gordon that Deadshot's after, it's Batman. Who says, I knew if I targeted Gordon, you would come out to play. And so the two of them engage on this train now going through a tunnel. And so it's a very claustrophobic fight. Deadshot pulls out his little arm cannons, is firing at Batman. And, he's like, nobody's ever charged me to deflect my bullets. And the two of them exchange some banter here and there, and they're fighting, and Batman overcomes him using the gauntlets again to cut through the armed cannon and punches out Floyd Lawton, Deadshot. It's just a really cool, very stylized scene again to see the two of them fighting on this train. It's a very, very cool fight scene, very, very short but very, very cool, and that's the end of it. We see them all get arrested. We see Ronald Marshall, who's been this businessman in the shadows this whole time, and everyone. It wraps it up all very nicely. And we see finally Alfred and Bruce. He's patching him up, and he recounts that being in that enclosed tunnel with the bullets flying and everything, it reminded him of the night his parents were shot. And he accounts to Alfred. He's like, I feel like I've been trying to stop those two bullets my entire life. And it just kind of everything ties back to that night and the use of guns and finding the guns in the sewer, then fighting Deadshot. It's all kind of a cool common thread here, which I really, really enjoyed. And that wraps up nicely. As a small note here, there's a tiny part played by Andrew Romano, who's actually the voice director for a lot of these, playing Martha Wayne, which is a cool little, just a little cameo right there. And that's Batman Gotham Knights. It's a quick watch too. Each of the shorts is about 10-ish minutes long, and getting to see all the different animation styles is just absolutely gorgeous. I can, if you think about, other classic, anime movies, Princess Mononoke, Metropolis, I'm blanking on a lot of the ones I've been enjoying over the past couple of years. Just the detail in these things is absolutely fantastic. You can tell a lot of this was done, by hand. Obviously enhanced by computer, computer processing, things like that. But there's a lot of detail in all of these scenes. Not sort of these big sort of lifeless blocks in the backgrounds for cityscapes and things like that. There's a lot of life in all of these shorts here, and I think that's my favorite part of all of this, is just seeing the different interpretations of Batman from these different studios and how they stylize his movements. From the living shadow aspect to armless Batman flying around is really cool. I don't know how to describe it, but it just looks really cool. So yeah, that's Batman Gotham Knight in a nutshell. I really enjoy it. It's a great Batman story. It's unlike anything that you've probably seen before from DC. Getting to see it broken up into little episodes like this, and none of them overstay their welcome. None of them feel like filler in any way. They all definitely are good standalone stories, which is really cool. I can think of plenty of times where I watched an episode of the Batman cartoon, the Superman cartoon, or Justice League, and just thought, wow, that was a real waste of 22 minutes of my life. There wasn't a whole lot accomplished there. It was just a filler episode, and I have no problem with filler as long as it has some point to it. It's at some point watching, there's some cool element to it. But each of these explores a different element of Batman, whether it's different people's perceptions of him, and have I got a story for you, or what drives Batman to keep going and working through pain, and just it's a really cool look at the different pieces of Batman and how he fights his war against crime. So I really like Batman Gotham Knight. I definitely recommend checking this out if you haven't already. We're just getting started there with this DC Animated Movie Universe review series. There's about 25 of these, and it's going to take a while. And just in time for her first big screen debut, we have Wonder Woman coming up next, which I haven't seen in a while, so I'm excited to rewatch that Wonder Woman movie and kind of, figure out how much I like it or don't like it. I don't remember much about it, so that'll be fun for a rewatch. And I'm super excited, obviously, to see the Wonder Woman movie come out here in just a couple of short weeks. So I'm excited about that. So if you have enjoyed this, let me know. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. I've been doing a lot of different reviews recently. I reviewed Guardians of the Galaxy 2 recently. Spoiler-free, I mind you. You can also check out, of course, all of the podcast episodes from the EOT Newsflash, the main series that we're known for on here. But yeah, if you've liked this, don't forget to like and subscribe. Tell me what you thought about it in the comment section. And, is there a movie that you're excited to see, coming up within the DC Animated Movie universe that I haven't got to review just yet, Are there other projects that you'd like to see me review in the near future? I'm open to all kinds of suggestions, so definitely let me know. But I'm looking forward to doing the rest of these. And of course, thanks for watching, guys, and we will see you guys next week with Wonder Woman.